My name is Emily, and here is my story. From the very beginning, it was clear I was the extra. Our family lived in a modest farmhouse on the edge of a small Kentucky town, surrounded by open fields, broken fences, and the heavy silence that filled our home when no one was pretending to care. My sister Alyssa, 2 years older and born smiling, was everything a parent could want, or at least everything our parents wanted. She walked early, talked early, won her first spelling bee in 2nd grade, and played her first flawless piano recital by 4th. The applause never stopped, not at home, not at church, not in town. Everywhere she went, people said the same thing: that girl's going places. And standing beside her, unnoticed, was me. My name is Emily. And I learned early on that I wasn't built for their spotlight. Alyssa got praise for everything: straight A's, music awards, her silky blonde hair. I got asked to take out the trash. She got birthday parties at the skating rink. I got cake after dinner, if I was lucky. When I came home with a B, Mom raised her eyebrows and said, "You'll do better next time." Alyssa brought home the same grade and got ice cream and a proud hug from Dad. It wasn't just about grades or talents, it was the way they looked at her. The way their voices softened. The way the whole house lit up when she was happy. And when I tried to get their attention, I felt like I was interrupting a show they didn't want to pause. I didn't throw tantrums. I didn't scream for love. I just watched. I watched Mom give Alyssa the bigger portion at dinner. I watched Dad skip my track meet to attend her piano performance, again. I watched them beam at her senior prom dress and barely glance at me when I left for a school dance in a hand-me-down. I learned to smile when I was supposed to nod when spoken to. But inside, I was memorizing everything. Every slight. Every cold shoulder. Every look of disappointment that passed over me like I was something they had to tolerate. It hurt, of course it did, but pain is a funny thing. Over time, it hardens. Quietly, I started to pull away. Not in a way they noticed, because they weren't looking, but in ways that mattered. I stopped sharing wins. I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped needing their approval. I began collecting moments, not because I needed revenge, but because I needed to make sense of it all. Like pieces of a puzzle I wasn't allowed to finish. They thought I was just the quiet one. They didn't realize I was watching, learning, preparing, and while Alyssa basked in their love like sunlight, I grew in the shadows, and sometimes, shadows stretch further than anyone expects. By the time Alyssa turned 16, she had a brand new red Chevy parked in the driveway with a ribbon on the hood. Dad said she deserved it, straight A's again, plus her acceptance into a summer music program in Louisville. Mom cried. Alyssa screamed. I clapped quietly, invisible in the corner, my hands stinging with the kind of applause you give when you're trying not to cry. When I turned 16 2 years later, I got a pat on the back, a list of chores, and the keys to the old beat-up farm truck with no air conditioning and a door that stuck if you didn't kick it just right. It's still a vehicle. Dad said when he tossed me the keys. Be grateful. Grateful, that word haunted me through my teenage years. It was their favorite one to use when I asked why Alyssa got everything: new clothes, weekend trips with her friends, even a bedroom makeover with fairy lights and pastel walls, while I was still sleeping under peeling wallpaper and patchy hand-me-down blankets. You should be grateful you have a roof over your head, Mom snapped once when I brought it up. Jealousy doesn't look good on you, Dad added, but it wasn't jealousy. It was abandonment in disguise. I started waking up before dawn to help Dad feed the cattle. I stayed late after school to help Mom with the garden, cleaned the chicken coop every Saturday, and still managed to keep my grades decent. No one noticed. No one said thank you. Meanwhile, Alyssa was rarely home. She had sleepovers every weekend, a curfew that didn't apply to her, and parents who covered for her even when she broke the rules. Once, she came home drunk from a party. Mom tucked her into bed with a glass of water and a prayer. When I got home 5 minutes late the following week, I was grounded for 2. It became harder to stay quiet. One evening, while we were clearing the dinner table, I asked Mom, voice trembling, Why do you treat us so differently? She froze, plate in hand. What are you talking about? Alyssa gets everything, I whispered. And I don't even get seen. Dad stepped in, voice sharp. You think we don't love you? You've got a lot of nerve. Maybe if you smiled more, acted more like your sister, I'm not her. I snapped, louder than I'd ever spoken in that house, silence. And then came the line that sealed everything, you're being ungrateful, Emily. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. That night, something inside me shut off, I stopped expecting anything. Not praise. Not fairness. Not love. At school, I smiled just enough. At home, I worked and stayed out of the way. I started saving what little I earned from a part-time library job. Not for clothes. Not for fun, but for escape, because the cracks in our family weren't just forming, they were growing into canyons, and I knew, one day soon, I'd need to climb out. I left on a Sunday morning, no dramatic goodbye. No family tears. Just a note on the kitchen counter, folded neatly next to a chipped coffee mug, I'm leaving for Lexington. Don't wait up. Mom never called. Dad didn't ask where I went. Alyssa probably didn't even notice. I packed everything I owned into the back of that sputtering farm truck and drove west, windows down, music loud, trying to convince myself it was freedom I felt, not fear. Lexington wasn't far, but it felt like another world. A place where no one knew I was second best. Where I could be something else, someone else. I moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a closed-down laundromat. The plumbing was loud, the walls were thin, and the floor slanted just enough that my desk chair rolled across the room if I wasn't careful. But it was mine, no one made me feel small there. No one ignored me. I had nothing, and still, I felt more seen than I ever had at home. I got a job waitressing at a rundown diner off Main Street. The shifts were long, the tips were short, and my feet ached constantly. But I smiled at customers, filled coffee cups, and memorized orders like they were code. Because at night, when my shift ended and the world finally went quiet, I opened my laptop and really worked. I taught myself HTML first. Then CSS. JavaScript. Python. Hours passed like minutes. The internet became my classroom, YouTube my professor. I failed again and again, crashed programs, corrupted files, broke my laptop more than once, but each failure taught me something new, and with every small breakthrough, I felt a part of me returning. A version of me that had been buried back on that farm, beneath years of being overlooked. I wasn't chasing revenge. I wasn't fantasizing about proving anything to them. I just wanted to never need them again. There were nights when the loneliness pressed in. When dinner was instant noodles and the power bill was overdue. When my only conversations were with customers asking for more ketchup. On those nights, I'd think of home, not with longing, but with clarity. I saw it all for what it was, a place that broke me because I didn't fit the mold they worshipped. And that was their loss, not mine. Eventually, I built my first website for a local bakery. Then another for a friend of a customer. Each job was a stepping stone. Each dollar earned was proof I could build a life from the ground up, without anyone's help. I wasn't shining yet, but I was starting to glow, and for the first time in my life, my story was being written by me. Success didn't arrive with a bang. It crept in slowly, disguised as late nights, quiet breakthroughs, and hard-won confidence. By the time I turned 23, I had built enough websites to create a portfolio that actually looked like something. Real businesses. Real clients. Real money. I wasn't just freelancing anymore, I was building something. Something mine. My first big break came from a downtown Lexington marketing firm. They needed a full e-commerce platform for one of their restaurant clients, and I happened to meet their junior partner over a cup of coffee I was still waitressing to afford. He saw my site, took a chance, and offered me the job. I delivered the project in 3 weeks. They paid me $5,000. It might as well have been $5 million. From there, everything snowballed. One contract turned into two. Two turned into a steady stream. I registered my business, hired a virtual assistant, and rented a small office above a yoga studio that smelled like lavender and ambition. By 25, I had clients in 5 states. At 27, I hit my first million. I remember the exact moment my bank account crossed the threshold. I was sitting at my desk in sweatpants, hair a mess, chewing cold pizza from the night before. I stared at the screen, blinking. Not because I couldn't believe it, but because I could. I had earned every cent. No one handed me anything. No one paved this road but me, and back in Kentucky? Silence, no calls. No congratulations. Just the same annual holiday card with the same familiar line. Love, Mom, Dad, Alyssa. I never replied. Sometimes, I wondered if they even knew who I had become. If they'd heard whispers from someone in town who'd seen my name on a client's site. If they'd ever typed my name into Google and saw the interviews, the company, the success that bloomed without them, but they never reached out. And I never gave them the satisfaction of updates. Still, the absence didn't hurt the way it used to. That pain had hardened into resolve long ago. I didn't need their praise. I had built a life defined not by approval, but by independence. I traveled. I bought property. I learned to say no to clients who didn't respect my time. I began mentoring young women trying to enter tech without a degree or a head start. And for the first time, I felt like someone worth being, not because someone else told me so, because I knew it, and every time I got that hollow holiday card, signed like a closed door, I smiled. They still saw me as the forgotten daughter. But they had no idea how far I'd come, without a single hand from home. The call came on a Tuesday morning, unknown number, Kentucky area code. I let it ring twice before answering, curiosity getting the better of me. Emily? My mother's voice was cautious, almost foreign. It's Mom. I paused. It had been over 5 years since I'd last heard her voice, and even then, it was through a generic voicemail. What's going on? I asked, tone flat. She didn't waste time. It's Alyssa. She's going through a rough patch. Her husband left her. Took most of their savings. She got laid off from the conservatory in Chicago. She's coming back home. I said nothing. Just let her talk. The farm's not doing great either. Your father's back is acting up. Vet bills for the cattle are piling up. And we were thinking. Her voice wavered, then softened, sweetened. If you're able to help out, maybe just a little, it would mean so much to the family. The family that was rich. I nearly laughed. For years, I had been nothing more than a ghost in their world. A name they scrawled on a Christmas card out of obligation. A silent photo on a mantelpiece, probably collecting dust behind Alyssa's framed recital portraits, and now that their star had fallen, they suddenly remembered the daughter they'd once overlooked. I can visit, I said finally, keeping my tone unreadable. Next week. Oh. Oh, that would be wonderful, honey. Thank you. She hung up with an exhale of relief, as if she'd just saved the farm herself. I stared at the phone for a long moment after. Not out of anger, anger was an old wound, but from the irony of it all. The golden child was coming home in pieces. And the daughter they dismissed was now the one they were counting on. I flew into Kentucky the following Friday. Not because I missed them, and not because they deserved me. I went to see it for myself. The house hadn't changed much. Still that white paint peeling off the wood, the rusting swing on the porch light that flickered when you walked past it. But it felt different. Smaller. Quieter. Worn down by time and the weight of choices no one wanted to admit, Mom greeted me with a nervous hug. Dad stood back by the porch rail, awkward and silent. Neither mentioned the years I'd been gone. No apologies. No recognition of the distance they'd created. Just hollow smiles and desperate eyes. And then Alyssa stepped onto the porch. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired. The confident glow she used to carry like armor was gone. She looked human. Hi, Em, she said softly. Hey, I replied, with a nod. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't offer comfort. I simply looked at the family who once had no room for me. They needed me now, but I wasn't there to save them. I was there to watch the story finally turn. Walking into my childhood home felt like stepping into a forgotten photograph, faded, fragile, and slightly warped around the edges. The kitchen still smelled like old coffee and lemon-scented cleaner. The dining room table was scratched in the same places I remembered. And the wallpaper in the hallway, peeling at the corners, hadn't been replaced in over a decade. But now, I had changed. I wore a black blazer over silk. My heels clicked across the worn wood floor like I didn't belong there, and I didn't. Not anymore. Look at you, Mom said, eyes scanning my designer purse like it held the cure to their problems. You've turned into a real businesswoman. Dad offered a stiff handshake, like I was a visiting investor instead of their daughter. And in a way, maybe I was. They asked about my flight, my work, my life, but none of the questions felt sincere. It was like they were reading from a script, checking boxes that had never existed before. Then Alyssa entered the room. She looked thinner, older. Her eyes, once so full of smugness and shine, were tired. Her clothes hung loosely, a shadow of the style she once flaunted. She didn't say much. Just a mumbled hey, before settling into a chair and looking away. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. They were hoping I'd be their solution. After dinner, the chicken, overcooked like always, I offered to help clear the table. Mom beamed like I'd handed her a check. You've always been so sweet, she said. I smiled. It was a lie. But I let her believe it. They didn't care who I had become. Not really. What they saw now was the car I drove, the bag I carried, the quiet power in my tone when I spoke. Suddenly, I was valuable. Not because I was Emily, but because I was successful. Funny how survival turns neglect into politeness. I played along. For now, I asked about the farm's debts. I nodded sympathetically when Dad talked about the vet bills, the broken tractor, the bank's letters piling up on the kitchen counter. Mom said they just needed a little help to stay afloat. Even Alyssa finally spoke. I'm trying to get back on my feet, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. It's just been hard. I listened. Not with warmth, but with precision. Like a surgeon studying the shape of an old wound, they didn't see the calculation behind my calm. They thought I came back with open arms, but I came back to settle a balance, and as they circled around me with forced gratitude and fragile hope, I played the gracious daughter. Smiled. Nodded. Even offered to stay a few more days, but deep down, I wasn't here to fix what they broke. I was here to remind them. The daughter they had forgotten didn't just survive, she returned stronger, sharper, and holding the pen to write the ending. It was time. The act of polite small talk, sympathetic nods, and feigned family warmth had run its course. I'd played the role of the gracious daughter long enough. One evening, after dinner, I asked them all to sit down in the living room. Alyssa looked confused. Dad seemed annoyed, already halfway toward the stairs before Mom gently tugged his arm. They all sat, shifting uncomfortably, unsure of what was coming. I took a slow sip of water and set the glass down carefully on the coffee table, still scratched from years ago, back when Alyssa accidentally knocked over my science project and no one said a word. I need to tell you something, I began, my tone calm, clipped. It's about the farm. Mom leaned forward. We know, sweetie. We're trying our best, but the bank, it's not the bank, I said, cutting her off gently. Not anymore. They blinked, I continued. 3 months ago, this property was posted for foreclosure. Public record. It wasn't hard to find. I made a few calls. Paid off the outstanding debt. And I transferred the ownership. Dad sat straighter. What are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, carefully placing a folder on the coffee table, this farm is mine now. Legally. The deed is in my name. Silence. Alyssa stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. Mom's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. And Dad did, tough, stoic, prideful Dad, Looked like someone had just knocked the wind out of him. I didn't come here to bail you out, I said. I came because I knew the storm was coming, and I wanted to see it land. So what, you're kicking us out? Alyssa finally snapped. No, I said. But things are going to change. I laid it out clearly. They could stay. I wouldn't force them out. But I had terms. I would take full control of the property, finances, management, everything. No more decisions without my input. No more ignoring me at the table while pretending I didn't matter. If they wanted to live here, they'd live by my rules. You don't get to cherry pick when I'm family, I said quietly. Either I'm part of this or I'm not. And if I'm not, then you don't get to stay on land that now has my name written on it. Mom started crying. Dad just stared blankly at the folder. Alyssa's pride crumbled behind her silence. They didn't say thank you. They didn't apologize, but they didn't fight it either. They had no room to. I rose from my seat and looked around the room, at the faded walls, the dusty curtains, the people who once dismissed me like I was background noise. Now they were quiet. Now I held the power, and I wasn't done yet. The shift didn't happen overnight. But it was unmistakable. The air in the house changed. Conversations became measured, polite, almost rehearsed. No more passive slights. No more subtle comparisons. My name, once used sparingly or not at all, now rolled off their tongues carefully, cautiously. Like they were trying it out again after years of silence. For once, I wasn't just a guest in my own family. I was the one setting the table, and everyone else knew to fall in line. Mom tried the soft approach first. Emily, honey, do you remember when you used to help me in the garden? She asked one morning over eggs. No, I said flatly, cutting into my toast. I was usually in the chicken coop or doing dishes while Alyssa practiced piano. She winced but didn't argue. Dad stayed mostly quiet these days. Pride used to radiate off him like heat from asphalt, now it clung to him like a damp coat. Every time he saw me reviewing documents at the table or walking the property with a contractor, he'd nod, say nothing, and quietly walk away. But Alyssa? She didn't go down easy. At first, she tried to pretend nothing had changed. She floated around the house, offering suggestions on how to improve things on the farm. Making offhand remarks like she was still the natural leader. One evening, during dinner, she turned to me and said, I was thinking I could help run things again, maybe talk to the suppliers, like I used to. I sipped my wine and met her gaze. When you left, the suppliers nearly sued for unpaid invoices. Her cheeks flushed. That wasn't my fault. Maybe not, I said, placing my glass down. But it's mine now. And I'm not taking chances. Silence. Mom changed the subject. Dad stared at his plate. Alyssa looked like she'd swallowed glass. Every meal after that became a quiet reminder. I held the keys now. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about power. It was about restoring balance to the family that once tipped the scales so hard in one direction that I nearly vanished. I wasn't cruel. I didn't rub it in, but I didn't bend either. They needed me now. Every roof repair, every grocery bill, every acre of land still in their possession, it all ran through me, and in that truth, they began to unravel. Alyssa stopped making suggestions. Dad stopped pretending he was in charge. Mom started offering to help clean after dinner, something she hadn't done in years. They were adjusting, slowly, reluctantly, to a new reality. One where the forgotten daughter was now the foundation, and I was no longer searching for their love. I wasn't waiting for their validation. I had moved beyond that. What I wanted now wasn't affection, it was acknowledgement, and every quiet, awkward dinner was another step closer to making them see what they refused to for so long, that the girl in the shadows had become the pillar of the house. There was a strange peace that settled over me in the weeks that followed, like an invisible weight I'd carried for years had finally been set down. This house, once filled with uneven love and stifled silence, now moved to my rhythm. The halls no longer whispered my unworthiness. The kitchen, the porch, the creaky floorboards beneath my childhood room, they all echoed something new now, control, not control rooted in cruelty or pride, but in clarity. For so long, I'd imagined what it would feel like to be seen by them, not as a burden or an afterthought, but as someone who mattered. And now, sitting at the same dining table where I used to eat in silence while Alyssa received praise with every bite, I had it, not their love. That ship had sailed long ago, quietly and without a trace, but their respect, that was finally mine, they didn't say it out loud. Not in words. But I saw it in the way Dad waited before speaking when I entered a room. I heard it in the careful tone Mom used when she asked my opinion. And I saw it clearest in Alyssa's eyes, the recognition that whatever place she once held had been eclipsed. I hadn't destroyed them, I had saved them, their home, their pride, their comfort, all preserved because the daughter they had overlooked chose not to overlook them in return. Sometimes, I asked myself why not let it all crumble? Why not leave them to the consequences of their favoritism, their silence, their years of choosing someone else over me? The answer was simple. Because I didn't come back for revenge. I came back for closure. I needed to stand in the house that once made me feel small and know that I no longer lived in that version of myself. I needed to look them in the eye and know they finally saw me, not as a shadow of Alyssa, not as a backup plan, but as the woman who held it all together. And they did. One evening, as I sat alone on the porch, the sun dipping below the hills like it had every night of my childhood, Mom stepped outside. She didn't say much, just stood beside me, hands folded, eyes on the horizon. "You've done a lot for this family," she said softly. "More than we deserved." I didn't reply. She wasn't wrong. Inside, Alyssa and Dad were setting the table for dinner. Something I never thought I'd see. It was my house now, my name on the deed, my rules on the table, my silence now filled with something stronger than words. I didn't need them to love me. I just needed them to know who I had become, and they did.